The CHE has been equity champions in our communities and have been and continue to do so, continue to be so, and an important role to ensuring our culturally and linguistically diverse children achieve their full potential. This is in direct alignment with DPL's values and mission to create welcoming spaces where all are free to explore and connect. I am grateful to the Denver Public Library staff who have kept us grounded in our values all of these years, and particularly throughout the ups and downs of 2025. At the Denver Public Library, we lean on the strengths that come from everyone's differences. We encourage everyone to ask questions and to remain curious, all while holding each other accountable to maintain this amazing community. As the Denver Public Library's new leader, I will ensure that we remain focused on staying true to our values, and despite the challenges facing libraries across the nation and our community, we will stay grounded. While you are here, we hope that you will take time to explore the CHE collection, visit special collections and archives on the 5th floor, and take a moment to discover the newly renovated Denver Central.
I am so excited to be in this building. It's part of our bond money that most of us taxpayers help pay for. And isn't it beautiful to estrenarla aquí? To actually try it out, is what I'm saying. Usually when I try out my Spanish, I try to interpret me. So I want to thank you all for being here today to recognize 57 years of CHE's advocacy. Last night I was doing my public school math and I'm going, oh my goodness, I was pregnant with my second child when they started. But those are the things you kind of put yourself, where were you when this happened? And we had leaders like Bernie Valdez and others that started this dream, and it was really needed. This room has a wonderful, exciting feel to it, and each of you have brought something today, and we are looking forward to giving you a great program as we present.
You know, my first CHE meeting was in the fall of 1970. I was a brand new teacher back then. And I went to St. Patrick's Grade School for the meeting, having been invited and recruited by Bob Pena and Ginny Esquivel, the early voices of CHE. CHE, as the archive documents will show, and you'll see them back here, began with conferences in the early years of 1968, 1969, with Bernie Valdez leading the way, along with Antonio Esquivel, who became the Secretary of CHE. Emerging from those early retreats would be educators with a mission to bring academic excellence with equity and inclusion for Latino students in the Denver Public Schools. One of the early presidents of CHE recalled that as CHE entered into the bilingual suit, many members were worried what would happen to their careers. Even as they considered the possibility of the negative impact, they knew they had to speak out on behalf of the Latino students and teachers. This CHE president and other members would follow the sage advice of Jimmy Esquivel, who would say, quote, and I quote, "Don't be scared." And so CHE was pushed by our early leaders to not be afraid of speaking truth to power. I would like to share with you a poem written just recently by Manuel Solano, an attorney who served as regional director of MALDEF, former president of the Chicano Bar Association, and now a board member of Advocacy for Public Education. This poem is entitled, "They Spoke for Us." They spoke for us. They said we were invisible, that our names were too long for the roll call, our accents too thick for the curriculum, our silence too easy to ignore. But in Denver, the Congress of Hispanic Educators stood up and said, "No mas." They didn't just teach, they litigated, they organized, they intervened. In the shadow of Keyes versus School District Number 1, where black families demanded desegregation, Chase stepped in, not to compete, but to complete the story. They said, "Our children deserve more than seats in classrooms. They deserve language, they deserve culture, they deserve justice." And behind them stood legal giants. Albert Kaufman with Maldev's Fire in his briefcase, Peter Roos with San Francisco's bilingual dreams in his pen. Together they carved a new path, not just for Denver, but for every child whose first language was treated like a second-class citizen. They fought for the 1984 Language Rights Consent Decree, and when the district tried to walk away, they held the line. Even now, the decree stands. Revised in 2013, it still protects our children's right to learn in the language of their soul, to be seen, heard, and taught with dignity. This is not just history. It is a blueprint, a battle hymn, a reminder that advocacy is not a whisper, it's a chorus, a quality public education for all. So today we say their names, we honor their fight, we carry their legacy in every policy brief, every lead sheet, every anthem we write. Because they spoke for us, now we speak for them.
Saludos. Good midday, everyone. Absolute pleasure to be here. I was looking forward to this morning/afternoon for many reasons. I'm going to honor the 5-minute time frame. If I go over, forgive me in advance, con permiso. There's a lot that I feel compelled to share. But first, I want to give the Board of Education, the Honorable Dr. Carrie Olson, former Board President Xochitl Gaitan, and Scott Esselman, Director at Large. Thanks for your governance and leadership, and I'm going to tie that back into how I want to send my messages. One of the very first questions, if it wasn't the first, it was one of the very first questions when something possessed me to say, yes, I'll go serve the little Kathys, the little Mikes, the little Federicos across the nation, was posed by Dr. Olson when she said, why Denver? And I told the story of little Alexi. So that's simply my why. I know there's some who are motivated by other factors, and I had a whole lot of little Alexis where I'm from. I was serving in the capacity, and it was someone who we know who gave me a little kick in the you-know-what, saying, hey, there's opportunity to do more elsewhere. It was Richard Carranza who gave me a nice little nudge. And it was the most rewarding, the best decision, both professionally, domestically, my wife agrees, personally, without a doubt, the most challenging. As I showed up and I did the little corral of the over of a half a century battles that you all have endured, I realized that just like someone told me when I first came on board, we respect your struggle, but our struggle you need to learn, and also how can we work together. And that's what I'm going to try to convey today, right? Because there's a lot of folks in the room who have incredible connection and respect for, and I know it's symbiotic. But one who's not with us, who was mentioned, and I see family members who are here, was one who had a profound impact, not only on me in my short tenure, I know on all of you, and that's La Doctora Martha Urias. So one thing about Martha that still resonates is you were always looking forward to seeing her, a little bit fearful, especially when she had to tell you what she felt, but she told you how she felt. And whether you were in a space to hear it or not, you had to embrace it. Whether it was finished with a Ay Caramba celebration or do better, it was always coming from the right place. I never had to question. Never had to question. And that's where we are in the time. And also Martha, if you're wondering why I'm wearing all these Easter colors, it's because this tie is one of the ties that she gave me that is in high rotation in my wardrobe. But when I look at what's happening here locally, it's a struggle for me to accept, and I know that every 2 years folks get excited because of what may be looming, right? And I get that. I'm not interested in getting into the local politics. But I'm also not wavered in my commitment to what matters, because it's hard for me to respond when I am, with all due respect, not listening, because it's not that it's not important. I take the feedback. The real threat is not here locally. It's coming from DC. And it's far from a threat at this point. It's full-blown attacks. Like this weekend, all day yesterday, I had to tell little Alexa and little Axel, I'm sorry, I cannot. Why? Because I have to get the words right to tell our international teachers no, they're not going to be shipped away. Because now it's $100,000 for them to get a visa that we would cover. Before that, it was English is the only language that we have to acknowledge. And I didn't hear much from a lot of entities saying, oh no, we're embracing our bilingualism, our multilingualism. And not too long ago, it was a full-blown attack on the funding of multilingual education. So that's where I leave, because I know that we have the commitment from our Board of Education, and thank you for never wavering and having me say explicitly that not only are we not interested in doing what I saw in that awful caricature that happened years ago, where Che was stabbed in the back by DPS. Just learned that. Just going through and seeing that incredible illustration. So not only has the board ever wavered, they made sure that I said it explicitly clear, and I know I've said it to many of you one-on-one. Not only are we committed to the modified consent decree, we're looking to make it even more robust. But this is the time where I feel I see so much power in the room, where we get together and send a clear message to DC that no, we will not. Because we did that well, Mayor Johnson, when we responded for our new arrivals. There's been a whole lot of raids. We've had a few, but the National Guard is not here, and I think it's because of your response and DPS's response. How powerful of a statement to make when we have the reputable, the honorable, the incredibly impactful, the well-respected names on a letter saying, not here. The way that we function has worked and will continue to work. So I'm offering that to everyone. Let's send a clear message to DC that the modified consent decree not only stays, that we're going to continue to lead here locally. In collaboration, muchas gracias.
Mil gracias y buenos días. Es un placer estar aquí con ustedes. I like to say that Che has so transformed the landscape of Denver that even the gringos speak Spanish now. And so that is a sign of great progress. But I think, in all seriousness, I think there are many leaders in this room who came of age in this city at a time where people told you if you wanted to fully be a part of Denver culture, you couldn't speak Spanish. You had to just speak English. I want to be a part of a moment where every child that grows up, including all the white kids in this city, believe you can't fully participate in this city unless you now speak Spanish. That should be a part of I'm honored to be here with some incredible leaders who I love and respect and consider mentors, and so I'm going to be very brief. I just want to say one thing before I read this proclamation. I was a teacher, I was a principal for much of my career, and I think like many of us, when I think back to the most profound influences on my life, they're educators. But the reason why Che has it so right is that the power of being an educator is you can't fully be an educator without also being an activist. Because yes, I love those educators for what they said, but I love them the most for what they did. Because ultimately our kids are not just watching what we teach them, we're watching how we lead and how we show up in the community, which means for you to fully teach, you have to lead. And for you to lead in difficult times, you have to be able to take risks. And when I think about what is required now, it will be just that. I was with my daughter in Washington, D.C., taking her there for the first time 2 weeks ago. And as we are driving an Uber through D.C., she stops and says, "Dad, what is that?" And I look out the window, and there is a Latino man riding his bike, stopped by 3 ICE agents, all masked, no identification, demanding that he show his papers out of the bike on which he's riding. We've just left 2 hours at the Holocaust Museum. 2 DC police officers helping these 3 unidentified agents. We turn the corner, and of course my daughter says, "Dad, we have to go back." So I get out of the car, and we walk the block back. And when I walk back that block, by the time we get there, he is gone. His bike's being loaded into a DC flatbed truck, and 3 ICE officers are jumping into a Metro DC police car and being shepherded away on the next stop. And my daughter says to me, we would never let that happen in Denver. This is the question now. Is there a moment when we know those kind of things will happen? The question is, how will we lead? Che, for 57 years, has taught us that when things matter, you stand up for them, no matter what the costs. Our kids and grandkids will look back and ask, in the moment when the President of the United States was telling stories that the migrants in this country come from legacies of rapists and murderers, what is the story we're going to tell? When they try to tell the story that you should be ashamed to go to school or to the library or to a public hospital or to the courthouse because you're not going to be safe there, how is the way we are going to make people feel in this city? That is the question for us. I think the answer will be, we will stand up and say, this is your home, this is your state, this is your city, and you belong here, whatever the costs. We will be in that together now. We will need Che more than ever to say, we will both teach the young people their stories, but we will also empower them to write their own stories. That's what waits ahead. I want to read this proclamation in honor of the incredible group of leaders that are here that created this organization from the city and county of Denver. I'm incredibly proud that our council president pro tem is here. You all probably know Hannah Romero Campbell, but whose own family has been a great leader in this cause, but is part of a historic moment now where we have a city council of 13 people made up of 6 Latinas on our city council for the first time. When not President Pro Tem becomes president of the city council, as I believe she will, that would make 6 consecutive years of Latina presidents of the Denver City Council. That's So, whereas the Congress of Hispanic Educators, Che, was organized in 1968 as a teachers' civil rights organization composed of educators, counselors, and employers in the Denver public schools, and has a civil rights advocacy record which has endured for 57 years. And whereas Che has promoted and been involved in major education policy decisions and actions related to the civil rights and educational programming for multilingual learners and their families since its inception. And whereas over the years, Che has championed and defended plaintiffs against civil rights violations like segregation, the Equal Educational Opportunities Act, and language rights. Whereas in 2012, Che and DPS agreed on the renewal of the consent decree, a program which has been recognized as a national model for bilingual and English as a second language programs, including identification of need, teacher preparation, structured research-based programs, and program evaluation. And whereas in 2025, the number of DPS students who identify as multilingual learners has increased substantially, now consisting of 30% of the student body within DPS. Further exemplifying that the work of Che continues to be vital to the education of students in Denver. And finally, whereas the City and County of Denver joins and recognizes the Congress of Hispanic Educators as guardians of native language instruction, as champions of native language programming for our students, their families, and community members, and as fierce defenders of civil rights for all of our educators and all of our staff. Therefore, I, Mike Johnston, Mayor of the City and County of Denver, by virtue of the authority vested in me, do hereby officially proclaim September 21st, 2025, to be known as the Congress of Hispanic Educators Day.
I'm really surprised at how emotional I'm feeling, and partly I think it's because my career, most of which I spent in the Denver Public Schools, was so fundamentally, foundationally, and profoundly shaped by the work of the Congress of Hispanic Educators. I'm probably one generation below the early founders. But I want to share 3 very personal stories to me about the ways in which my life has, truly my professional life and my personal life and my values have been shaped by Che and the work that Che has led. So I became a teacher in Denver in 1989. My very first experience as an educator in DPS, I saw Ramon del Castillo. Where's Ramon? He's here. There he is. So was taking the summer classes. And so you had to do 150 hours of training. I did them over 2 summers. And the first summer I show up on the very first day, I'm a brand new baby teacher. If you have been a brand new baby teacher in DPS, you know you don't get your first paycheck for a month. And so you show up, and I don't know what I was thinking, but we're in these trainings and they have these food trucks and I have zero money with me. And Ramon, who's teaching classes, me invita a comer. And it was an act of kindness that I have never forgotten in terms of what it means to be in love with people who care about each other. And I have always been so grateful for how you did that for me as an act of kindness. But even more so, the content of the classes that I was able to participate in as an early career teacher in DPS. And so that's the first story that I want to tell you. The second story that I want to tell you is an experience that I had as a principal. So I became a principal. I was a principal at Remington Elementary School. Remington had been, yeah, you can clap for that. The year before I got to Remington, it had been profiled in the Denver Post, for those of you, in the Rocky Mountain News, for those of you who remember this. They profiled the lowest performing school and the highest performing school in Denver. And Remington was the example of the lowest performing school. For a full year, they wrote stories. And the stories were the kind of stories that were heartbreaking. And the reason why Che is so active in fighting for the rights of children. It was stories about lack of resources, about unqualified teachers. When I went to interview at the school, my first thought was like how dirty it was. And I came home and I told my husband, there are a lot of things that can be hard about education, but cleaning the building is not one of them. And when I became the principal at Remington, my commitment was to create the kind of environment that all kids could thrive in, so that children who come to school have the opportunity to learn in their first language, that they see Spanish as an asset. I was incredibly proud when we got white superintendents to say English sooner, Spanish longer, because of what it did to change the way the system worked. And I remember having a conversation with an unnamed principal of an unnamed high school in Denver that had an IB program. You could probably start to think about what school I'm talking about. And we were looking at data. And he said, oh, well, the reason that our data doesn't look good is because all these kids are here. Like if they just went to some other school, our data would look great. And so I had the opportunity to say to him, no, sir, you're a public school. You don't actually get to pick the kids who come to you. You get to serve all of the kids who come to you. And, we had things like secretaries who crossed off native language instruction on home language questionnaires, and so that parents couldn't choose because they just crossed it off the list. And through the hard work of amazing leaders like Darlene, where's Darlene? We completely changed some of those old practices. There is a lot that still needs to be done, but we have come so far in serving all kids and in ensuring that their rights, their civil rights that are memorialized in the consent decree are front and center in what needs to happen. And so it is just such a profound joy that I've had to be able to work in the field with all of you to support and represent your rights, your perspectives at the state level now, and I'm just incredibly grateful for the 31 years that I had in Denver working with all of you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right. I'm not going to read the entire proclamation because it's a little bit similar to the one from the state, from the city as well, but I will read just a little bit of it. Whereas in 1968, the Congress of Hispanic Educators, CHE, was organized as a teachers' civil rights organization, which was composed largely of Chicano teachers, educators, counselors, and staff, and has a record of civil rights advocacy that has endured for 57 years. And whereas CHE has been involved in every major educational policy decision and action related to the civil rights of multilingual learners and their families and educational programming for students and speakers of languages other than English since 1968, and continues to govern the consent decree for multilingual, multicultural education for DPS, which now includes over 30,000 students, 80% of whom speak Spanish and identify as Latino. Then it goes into some history, whereas in 73, yada yada, in 74, in 84, in 99. So there's a lot of whereases in here. And finally, I'll just say that therefore, on his behalf, therefore I, Jared Polis, Governor of the State of Colorado, do hereby proclaim September 21st, 2025 as 57-year celebration and anniversary of the Congress of Hispanic Educators. Signed by Jared Polis.
First of all, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. This is a great event.
Yes.
And I too, I have to tell you, feel very emotional this morning. I wasn't expecting to feel so emotional, but seeing so many former warriors who are still fighting the good fight, I have to say thank you. I was told I had 5 minutes. So I'll try and limit my remarks to 5 minutes. I want to say 2 things. Number one, I want to thank Chet. I want to thank the original leaders of the Congress of Hispanic Educators for your courage, your leadership, your willing to act fearlessly at a time when it was really hard to do that. Let me take you back, because I'm old enough to take you back. In 1973, I was, I think, a 25-year-old lawyer for the Mexican-American Legal Defense and Educational Fund. And we represented the Congress of Hispanic Educators in intervening in the Keys case, which had just gone up to the Supreme Court and came back down to the district court. And Che said, we have Latino students and teachers involved and represented in that case because it was originally a desegregation case. But we have our story to tell. But let me tell you the situation at that time. That is a time when people in this city, many people, were fighting busing. It was a time when the buses were put on fire. Remember that? It was a time when the school board was fighting, almost physically, over busing. It was a time when we had the Crusade for Justice and all the walkout of the West High students. Remember that? Those were difficult, challenging times. And yet, these teachers, the Congress of Hispanic Educators, who were very young at that time, said, we're going to get involved. We're going to sue our boss. Does that take courage? If you're a, quote, lowly teacher, and you sue your superintendent and your school board, who, by the way, at that time, was it Kishkudish? Help me. Who was the superintendent at that time? Someone said, right? Who said that if you put Latino kids and black kids in the same classroom, that's an integrated classroom. He said that Latino kids were white, and therefore the school system was integrated. And went up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court justice said, no. No, Latinos are a separate, identifiable ethnic group, and you cannot just have Latinos and blacks in the same classroom and say there's integration. No, you've got to have whites. And that came back down, and Che intervened. And you all were threatened. I remember. I was that young lawyer with Dr. Jose Cardenas, who was your expert witness, and all of that, and Peter Roos, and those great lawyers. But you all stood strong. And here you are today, still standing strong. Point number 2, in addition to saying thank you for your courage and leadership. Point number 2 is we still need you. We still need you. There's been reference already by the excellent speakers here about the mood of this country. And let me quote, if I might, one of your former Che leaders, who in 1976, Ubaldo Chavez. Some of you might remember Ubaldo? Let me quote him. Today, the needs of our people and the mood of our country have led to the emergence of a modern America, the Hispano, determined to correct the many social, economic, and educational inequalities which have resulted in misconception and lack of understanding. Che pledges themselves to building upon the proud legacy given to us in America by our forefathers. Within our classrooms and communities, we are united in purposes, unwavering in our determination and to the advancement of the Hispanics and to the community to which we are eternally dedicated. He said that, your leader, in 1976. And those words apply today more than ever before. I'm not going to go through the litany of all the stuff that's been said about us. You all know. All I want to say is that this is the time when we still have to fight. We still have to fight. And not for ourselves, for our children. I now have grandchildren. We are fighting for them. And when I have some friends of mine who come to me and say, you know what, I'm moving to Spain. I'm moving to Mexico. I want to leave the country. And I tell them, I ain't going nowhere. I keep it working that. Because I'm going to stay here and fight for my kids, my family, and the community. So today, thank you for your historic leadership. Thank you for your continued leadership and courage. We need you now more than ever before. Let's all join together and congratulate Chair for a great history. Gracias.
Eso es lo que siento de todos ustedes, de lo que han hecho y de lo que todavía se tienen que hacer. Ustedes son inspiradores en este momento y ustedes han sido inspiradores de la carrera que hemos tomado. And speaking about pride, speaking about orgullo, I want to just ask Mireya to stand. She's a proud graduate of Centennial, now at Northeastern. And so she and Esperanza, oh, you stand too. It's been a joyful and wonderful day. So I wanted to make 2 points today. First, the consent decree and the modified consent decree. And the provisions of that consent decree that really reflect the best of the Congress of Hispanic Educators. And it's the section of that decree that deals with personnel and qualifications for personnel. I remember starting in my time working on the case, as Federico so eloquently explained, it was already a case that had been decided in a very historic way as one of the seminal cases on desegregation in the U.S. Supreme Court. First time in a northern state, it was found that a school board could basically violate the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution because of their pattern and practice of segregated schools. But it was the Congress of Hispanic Educators that injected into that soup the importance of the doctrine that no student should be left behind because of limited language proficiency. I remember the first meetings that I went to early on in the 80s. I was a young lawyer really from Michigan coming into Denver, having been raised in the Valley, and going to some office over there on the west side. And there was people like Federico Peña, Paul Sandoval, and others who were in that room, talking about what was coming and what we would do. And fast forward, Darlene Ledoux, Rob Peña, and so many of you who were involved, having conversations about what we could do. Litigate, yes, that was always an option. Good lawyers know that's always an option. But we also knew that if we could work with the Denver School Board and with like-minded people on that school board, like Paul Sandoval, that we could fashion a remedy that would frankly work for everybody, for teachers and for the students that we cared most about. And so, in those days, we sat down and over 1,000 hours of time that I spent on that case in 83 and 84, getting down to the final details of what this consent decree would look like. and making our final presentations to the Board of Education. And people like Bernie Vandes and others were helping in making the presentation. Darlene, Antonio were always there at the forefront. And looking at that section of the decree that talks about personnel, that we knew would be the heart of success. Because we knew that, as Peter so aptly described so many times, he would come from California and he would stay at our house. He's the funniest guy in the world because no matter how serious the day was, he always would make us laugh. And so we wrote that section of the decree because we wanted to reflect the best that there is in our society. And that's the teachers who are represented here. So the Congress of Hispanic Educators, you have led the way. Your teachers, your administrators, you make us all proud, and you have given so many of us the opportunities that you have given us. So hats off to you, and let's give you a round of applause one more time. I can say this about the eloquence of speakers. You heard it from our wonderful mayor, Mike Johnson. He said it right. What's at stake today? You heard it from Federico Peña. It's easy for us to go back and talk about our history. Some of us here, 400 years in New Mexico and Colorado, 12th and 13th generations from Los Alces, Antonio, and northern New Mexico and other places. We can talk about the history of what we've overcome. We usually talk about why the American GI Forum was formed in 1948, because in Texas, they were not allowing Mexican Americans who were being killed in that war to be buried in the national cemeteries of our nation. We can talk about the formation of the SPM-DTU in northern New Mexico and southern Colorado, in the town of Antonito, which still stands there as a National Historic Site. And those people, now 125 years ago, came together and said, we are going to stand up for the rights of the Mexican Americans who are being excluded, and we're proud on our language. We can go back through all of that history. We can read a fast forward to times that have been more current, that have inspired so many of us. I remember that historic election where this young Mexican American lawyer, member of the House of Representatives, was running for mayor against a white-shoed part of the Denver establishment. Nobody thought that he could win. And he stood out there with, I think, about everybody who's in this room, even those of you who weren't born or being asked to register to vote. And somehow, he didn't know who I was. I was working as a volunteer in '83, but it was inspiring. And that mayor went on to not only imagine a great city, but to create, I think, the best and leading city in the United States of America. Through the years, that baton has been handed on. Now, we have a non-Mexican American mayor of the city and county of Denver. He happens to be a white guy. Happens to have roots in places like Vail, Colorado. Knows this state like the back of his hand. But I gotta say, Mayor, and I think this crowd will agree, your statement about the threats that face us and the coalescence of the unity of purpose that we must have today is simply outstanding. Thank you, Mayor Johnson.
I was so lucky in 1995 when Dr. Marta Urioste called me up and she said, hey, she says, we hear you're a professor at CU. Do you know something? And I said, well, I don't know if I do or not. She said, okay, well, we need you. And she says, can you get here by 3 o'clock? Yeah, I can get here by 3 o'clock. Why? Well, because we need for you to drive Peter Roos, who's the attorney that we've been referenced to. He needs to go to Brighton and he's got to get there before 5 because they closed the green chili stand. And he can't go back to California without the Colorado green chilies from Columbus stand. So that was my first official job as an educational advisor. So it's been wonderful. But I guess I want you to know, I got in the car today And I was also emotional, and I didn't quite know why. But it was partly because the people that I worked with took the cause very seriously, but they didn't always take themselves so seriously. It has been the honor of my professional life to work with the Congress for Hispanic Educators since 1995. And so, needless to say, and you've all heard the people speaking, we stand on the shoulders of giants. We know we still have a lot to do, but my goodness, when I look at what has happened, and the people, your children, you were babies, you didn't know your parents were putting their livelihoods on the line when they signed up to be chain members. And now it saddens me that people are advised not to do that young teachers are advised not to do that, because I can't think of anything better than getting involved in advocacy, because our CHE founders realized that the true definition of an educator was way beyond the classroom and way beyond the books. It was in learning how to educate for a future generation. So as you all know, and I'm not going to repeat, CHE came of age at a time during the Civil Rights Movement. And right here in Denver, and many of you were involved, I'd like to say I was a baby, I wasn't, but I read about it in the newspapers, because that's what those of us in college did, we read about it, but we didn't always get involved in the ways that we should have. But the people sitting in this room did, and how lucky we are. CHE brought to attention that the Hispanic and Chicano community at that time had unique needs. They were similar, but not the same. And as Manuel Solano in his poem said, that CHE stepped into the shadows of the key case, not to compete, but to complete the story. And we owe all of them a lot. Without being repetitious, here we are 57 years later. And we find ourselves at a time when the federal government and the Supreme Court are now giving serious attention to what had been unthinkable even in 1974, even in 1968. And that includes proposals to abolish birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment, allowing the arrest and deportation of people who look Hispanic. What does that even mean? Who speak Spanish with accents, promoting the notions that English should be the only language taught in schools and learned by children. We know in Denver that's ludicrous. That's ludicrous. And throughout our society, that English should be the only language spoken in society. Not to mention the drastic cutting of federal support for public education for our students. So as the standard bearers of CHE's proud history, we currently find ourselves in a situation that I think is as precarious as it was in 1968, with the linguistic and civil rights of our students once again at risk. In times like this, the work of CHE and its members is more needed and more important now than ever before. It's not just our history and our legacy, it's a reminder of the importance of advocacy in the ongoing struggle for quality schooling for all students. I'm going to repeat this because I think it bears repeating. In 1984, the court case was argued and won on behalf of 8,000 students in Denver. There are now, Latino students are now 50% of the student population in DPS. They are 30,000 kids come to school speaking languages other than English and are multilingual learners, and 80% of them speak Spanish as a first language. So we represent way more students. It is not now a minority of students in the school district. It is the school district. And from its inception, believe it or not, Superintendent, those of you who thought, it might not always seem that DPS has been a friend, but we were reminiscing over some of the pictures in the back where we'd fight all day over stuff, and then we'd go to happy hour. Because in essence, the cause was the same. And we all knew it, right, Suzanne? I mean, we all knew it, and we knew that we had way more in common than we didn't. But the work of people outside the district continues to be as critical now as it was in 1968. And I've been charged with saying that in Denver, the work that those who went before us have engaged in and have worked so diligently to preserve the rights of kids, we will remain awake and vigilant to protect those rights in the future, and we ask for your support. We all understand, the mayor, you included, that bilingual, biliterate, and bicultural students are not just successful, they are essential to our collective future. Now more than ever. been accomplished, and Rich Udioste, I know you're here, he said that we now have a new organization, a new chapter, it's in heaven, and it's called the Congress of Heavenly Hispanic Educators. So, much has been accomplished, much remains to be done. Juntos podemos y adelante. Thank you all for coming here, and go Broncos.